Hello and welcome to Edison TV. I'm Dan Ridsdale and today I'm joined by Tom Clayton, founder and chief executive officer of IntelliAM. IntelliAM is a technology business focused on applying machine learning and artificial intelligence to optimize asset management within the manufacturing industry, with a particular focus on fast-moving consumer goods. The company is listed on Aquis and it's capitalized at around about £12 million. Tom, many thanks for joining me today.
Good morning.
Can you start by introducing IntelliAM for an audience who might not know the business?
Absolutely, yeah. So as you've well explained, obviously it's intelligent asset management. So we are ingesting vast amounts of data that already exists inside industry, inside machines, from line controls, IoT sensors and other auxiliary devices. And we're creating self-learning algorithms to drive improvement in terms of productivity, reliability, essentially getting a lot more for less out of the assets, which is a significant requirement for manufacturers right now as the world's growing populations and demands on increased volumes take place.
Right, and what is the specific problem you're aiming to solve with your solution?
So there's always pressure on large manufacturing. You're talking about customers that have got low margins, high volume products. With the increasing pressures around energy and also increasing pressures on cost associated with that, and also great populations that I refer to. So you're talking about a requirement of between 50 and 60% improvement in the next sort of 20 years in terms of productivity values, just to feed the world's growing populations. So there's great pressure on these companies, and they're not just going to build new greenfield plants. That's really expensive. So it's a way of harnessing data and using sweating existing assets a lot harder, a lot more efficiently to get much greater returns. And, on a very sort of world problem, if you like, it's in terms of things like milk production. It's essentially providing more milk without the need for more cows or more pastures. In terms of grain, it's not needing more fields. It's actually getting more volume at less energy consumption. So you can see that it's very much a current problem in terms of productivity that we are, facing head on in terms of machine learning improvements.
Right, and how do you define your addressable market within FMCG? How should we think about your market opportunity?
Yeah, so we have a long-standing business from a consulting side in the market, which is very much in the food and beverage industry. This is the UK's largest manufacturing sector. In fact, it's larger than the automotive and aerospace industries put together. It's not one that's often talked about, but it's probably the most required right now in terms of productivity boost. It employs over sort of 500,000 people, roughly 12,000 manufacturing sites in the UK alone. So it's a very sizable addressable market that we already have significant leverage in. So we serve 50% of the world's top 10 food and beverage companies, and probably roughly about 25% of the top 100 from the FMCG list. So we already have a lot of traction, and it's a vertical that we understand. We've got lots of domain expertise in order to drive out our solution. But of course, we can target, and we do have other verticals, but we sort of remaining laser focused on this to become something of a definitive standard in our space.
Understood. And in terms of the deployment of AI, we hear time and time again that any AI is only as good as the data you've got. Now, you've developed this six-step process to enable your clients to collect and optimize the data. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the reason behind the sort of steps that we created is in order to understand how customers can scale AI through their processes and sort of improve. The more data that they obtain, the more computing power that they use, the greater the insights, the greater the value. But of course, it comes at a cost. So it allows essentially for an entry-level solution around the use of smaller data points, IoT sensors, to provide things like predictive maintenance solutions. As we start to harness more data, we can contextualize that data That allows us to remove false positives and start understanding more how to drive longevity out of components, more reliability in that sense. And then as we start to harness data across the entire production line or process, we can start to do things like optimize run speed efficiencies, tolerance settings to get the maximum throughput through production lines. But we're talking at this point ingesting things like 500 million data points per month per line in order to create these sort of algorithms, these self-learning algorithms that then govern the line. And obviously they become more powerful over time and start to drive the performance that these clients are looking for.
So can you talk about specifically what kind of data are you gathering and what sort of insights are you doing? How are you helping your clients increase productivity?
Yeah, so the data that we provide, that we will gather, as I've already mentioned, exists in plant and machinery. So it's sometimes in the form of sensors or even in the line controls themselves from the manufacturers. So a lot of this is programmable logical data. It's zeros and ones to a large extent, but also parameters like temperature levels, what SKUs on the line, the shifts on the line, speeds, etc. So by obtaining this information and contextualizing it, we can provide all sorts of solutions. From a predictive point of view, we can provide a more advanced predictive maintenance solution. So not only do we understand, for example, a stress wave on a critical bearing, we know when it runs on that SKU and at that tank level, at this speed, that is what it should be, or this is a total outlier and this is a problem. So you get really accurate detection without false positive, which obviously on critical machinery becomes, the most advanced warning and the most accurate warning, and deals with the variability that exists in industry, because there's immense amount of variability on even just on one individual production line between shift tolerance settings and speed adjustments and all the different SKUs and everything that goes down the line. In terms of then providing solutions around the governance of a manufacturing line, manufacturing lines still heavily depend on individuals in terms of setting up a line, understanding even down to the sort of the interfaces on the line in terms of speeds and settings around different SKUs. And a lot of these decisions are often emotionally led decisions. So it's based on how they felt when they got a performance off that SKU the last time they run this line and things like that. What the machine learning does obviously is sit there and it learns exactly what the optimum speed and the optimum settings or torque head settings for different types of applications, things like that. So what this means is if somebody's then running outside the tolerances, the IntelliAM platform will tell them how much percentage they are running outside these optimum settings to get maximum throughput with reduced waste efficiencies.
And you started life as a consultancy focused on the asset management sector. Can you discuss, I guess, that pathway and what that background and that client base, that domain expertise brings to the equation when deploying the technology platform?
Yeah, and it's essentially the secret sauce to the products in many respects. One would argue that many of the machine learning models and the AI sort of algorithms that exist, obviously they can be deployed by many people, but if you don't have the domain expertise, you don't understand whether the data in itself is clean and it's correct in terms of parameters, which parameters create the certain insights, or even the insights that are required in order to drive these performances, then you're very limited. And we've seen some of that in industry where people have tried to provide AI solutions, but with almost from a software space and don't really understand the requirement. And then some of the big blue chip companies are turning to us in sort of requesting support in how they get their AI solution to work. Clearly our focus is on the IntelliAM product, so it was a compliment in one way, but we use a mix of skills from the consulting team, automation to understand how to ingest the data in a safe way to ensure that it's clean and correct, and then we use manufacturing and engineering skills around the machinery to understand the types of insights, ensure that we understand the outputs are correct and the recommendations are powerful in that way. And obviously they're working alongside data scientists to create the models, and then obviously software engineers to create the visualization and the reporting features to our clients. So it's it's a coming together. If you remove one of those pieces of that jigsaw, you can't create the sort of solution that the clients require.
And can you talk about the machine learning and the AI? I mean, I guess the whole recent wave of AI has been really driven by the LLMs, the generative AI. I mean, you're using machine learning. Do you use Gen AI as well? Can you see the two being combined, or is this really is machine learning the right thing for you?
So they can be combined, and we do combine them quite well. But I mean, ultimately, when you look at productivity and reliability, we are talking about machine learning because you have to train the algorithms on the data set specific to that particular component. It's almost like every component has its own unique fingerprint in that respect. Once we have inside the IntelliAM platform, we can use generative tools to ask this data set certain key questions and prompts. An example of that is we recently asked the data set to tell me something interesting about the data that's not in alarm. And it recognized that the lubrication values were all starting to increase, the rub and friction values, even though they'd not got to a point of wear and failure, that essentially the site in question wasn't lubricating their assets. So, and these are really important asset management findings. And so, and similarly, when it comes to the analysis of data, whilst the machine learning will remove the variability, remove false positive, give you accurate detection, you can then use large language models to look at the characteristics of that data and support recommendations and improvements. Or, for example, we can ring fence that and upload things like manufacturing manuals. So the people can ask the large language models, what lubrication do I use, what part do I get, things like that. So it's really, really efficient, but ultimately at the core of it, the machine learning algorithms are required, and that particular data set is required to drive improvement.
Get you. And so when you're deploying the platform, are you deploying this on new equipment, or is it going on to the existing installed base?
It's on both in the straight answer, but 95% will be on existing plant and equipment. When you look at a production line, there is a vast amount of data available, but it's untapped. It just remains redundant at this moment in time. So the information in a modern day production plant exists, so it is about harnessing it and using it. It's not about adding more hardware or more telemetry in order to do that. So in most cases, it's about making better the existing assets, improving the performance. But obviously, we are working with some big clients on new greenfield sites where we're looking at a factory of the future solution in order to give them, from day one, give them that sort of solution. So it's probably easier on a greenfield site, like anything, because you've got everything baseline, brand new from the scratch. But there are very few greenfield sites, so the solution is very much on existing plant and equipment.
Yeah, understood. And can you talk about the sales process? AI, it's quite a noisy space right now. What's enabling you to sort of rise above that and get through to your customer base?
Yeah, so it is very noisy. And unfortunately, the term AI is probably being slightly overused. And so there's a lot of, certainly hardware products being sort of leveraged in industry to create this idea that there's some sort of algorithm that's going to create a more advanced solution, when really it's perhaps just a sensor in a box that's arguably done what it's always done, with somebody sat behind it reading the sort of data. So for us, certainly in year one, having a significant client base that we have, there's been lots of education for our clients. So it's as much a gatekeeping as anything else. So they understand what is truly AI, what is, in terms of machinery, obviously machine learning solutions, how it works, how the algorithms continue to improve, and how it benefits them as a business. So there's been a significant amount of effort in terms of training and education in that particular area. Going back to the 6 stages, obviously then we have the scaling way, so the customers can essentially start to use the power of the IntelliAM platform at a relatively low cost to start providing value, and then they can scale up with more and more data in order to try and through a return on investment sort of process, which is speaks for itself really, and that's how we scale through the businesses.
Right. And where are you seeing the biggest opportunities in the near term? Are you seeing it with the smaller manufacturers or the big giants?
Very much with the larger manufacturers, and it is a case of return on investment. So we've seen up to sort of 7% improvement on a manufacturing line, which in a FMCG environment is a significant volume of product that would have been wasted or lost through efficiencies. That return on investment on them sort of margins is very, very quick. Smaller manufacturing companies, obviously, the budgets are tighter. We see that we have solutions around what we call stage 3, stage 4, where we're using sensors, low-level data that will be valuable to these clients. But to adopt the whole machine learning platform through to stage 6, where they're really driving their supply chain, comes at a price which is harder for smaller manufacturers to justify. And of course, we are in an environment where NAI costs and tariffs and other things have taken place. There's a lot of pressure on some of these companies to invest in new technologies like that at this moment in time. Less a problem for the larger manufacturers.
Right. And in terms of your route to market, is this all direct sales, or is using channel partners an opportunity for you?
Yeah, so up to now it's all been direct through the sort of customer base that already exists within the business. However, we are looking at strategic partnerships in regions that are less accessible to us. Obviously, we're only based in the UK, and as we have some people based in America, but largely in the UK. So we recognise that certainly on some of the early stages that are sort of we can productize as a more off-the-shelf solution with some minimal training to what are the right partners that do have an engineering knowledge base and a customer base that they can leverage as well. Then we are looking this year to identify a few of those partners and allow them some of the access to the platform to drive value to their own customers. So yeah, there will be some of that.
But can you talk about your relationship with SKF? What can you tell us about the nature of that, and what do you expect that to deliver over the next few years?
Yeah, so SKF have been a partner in many respects for many years, from both the consulting and now on the software side of the business. So it's not a new relationship. We've had a great relationship where we've shared knowledge around advancing product solutions that SKF manufacture to give greater value to the customers, whether it's around prediction, prevention, or of course, in the case of SKF, around optimizing lubrication systems and things like that. So we are actually doing a joint conference with SKF this year in the UK and bringing a lot of manufacturers to that. They got a very close alignment to our vision. So they have a strapline around fighting friction, because 20% of the world's energy is actually taken up due to friction. Obviously, as the world's largest bearing and lubrication systems manufacturer, then they take that head on and see that as part of their responsibility to drive that. And that's hand in glove with what we're trying to do in terms of driving efficiencies. And so there's a natural fit between the businesses in terms of but their hardware and we're software. So where the relationship sits essentially is, as these guys are driving more hardware, they've all got connected systems that use data points. They can drive in around machine data and the algorithms that we can create to advance the performance of these systems. And that's where the product development and the relationship is being developed.
Great. And I can't have an interview without talking about tariffs nowadays. Can you talk about how you expect that to play out within your sector, and whether there's any difference between small manufacturers, large manufacturers, etc.?
Yeah, so I don't think tariffs are a concern for ourselves as primarily as a software business, and obviously the consulting side of the business is primarily in the UK market, so it's not a great concern. We do have a minimal amount of hardware that we provide to customers, whereby some of the sensors are missing. The vast majority is not there, but there may be some missing hardware. That obviously has to cross borders. That could have an implication, and so that we have to be quite strategic about where we provide strategic partners and solutions to ensure that these are the right ones and that we are cost effective in that particular area. So there's some thought process needed, but it's not a major barrier for us. In terms of customers, relating back to large manufacturers and smaller manufacturers, I don't think we're going to have an issue with the larger manufacturers. We have seen, for example, in some of the major drinks industries, we was planned to do some work in Mexico on one of their larger products this year. What they've done is switch tack, and they've asked us to start doing work in other regions, both Africa and Ireland instead, where the tariffs and the difficulties are not. So they are looking to drive they want to drive the improvement, but they are strategically changing that as well. Obviously, smaller manufacturers, tariffs are going to be more difficult when they're trying to access new technologies and invest in new technologies. They're the people that are going to cut back, I guess, and hold on to the purse strings for a little bit longer whilst these things play out.
Gotcha. And then, I mean, looking forward, as from an investor's perspective, what are the key milestones? What are the key KPIs that we should be looking at in IntelliAM to measure your progress?
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously, there's always going to be focus on profit and revenue, but given the nature of our business, I think we've talked about the sort of 6-stage journey, and I think it's the number of customers that we bring into that stage obviously turns into annual recurring revenue from a software subscription point of view. So I think the ARR metric is going to be absolutely key, and it's an area that we're certainly trying to drive multiples off each year to show growth in the business. And when we can see that from H1 to H2 this year quite significantly. And I think the more people we bring into this funnel, obviously there's a natural place. So we are looking at creating a dashboard to support investors in terms of actually seeing the number of customers coming in at the different stages, and obviously what that means in terms of ARR. So people can pretty much transparently see the pipeline and what that's going to equate to as time goes on. So that's certainly our focus. So ARR is the main driver behind the platform, given the fact that we're a software company.
Great. So ARR and the pathway towards getting to a higher ARR, I guess.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, it means that our product is going to be very sticky. I mean, it's a solution that once adopted by a client, they're not really going to want to turn off the learnings and the work order actions and the governance that's given to a manufacturing side. That could be quite difficult for those customers, not in a way that is incorrect. It's just that they want to harness that, and the more information, the more powerful it becomes. Obviously, the more information also means the subscription values will scale up through the process. So, for example, we've not lost any customers in the last 12 months, and we certainly not envisage doing that going forward because the software is providing value to these people.
Fascinating stuff. Tom, many thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.